Just across the water from New York City's bustling skyline lies a patch of land that most people never notice. North Brother Island. Shrouded in fog, sealed by law, and swallowed by nature, it sits abandoned, yet not forgotten. Because beneath the ivy-covered ruins, something lingers. Not ghosts exactly, but memories. Unspoken tragedies. And the echoes of lives that never made it back. This is where the city sent its sick, its shamed, and its secrets. Where isolation wasn't just a treatment, it was a sentence. A quarantine that stretched far beyond disease. It held the infamous Typhoid Mary, locked away for decades. It watched helplessly as over 1,000 people drowned just offshore in the General Slocum disaster. It quietly transformed into a drug rehab center for teenage boys, then shut down when it became clear no one was watching. And now? Now, it decays. The walls crumble. The trees reclaim it. And the island waits, not to be discovered, but to be understood. This isn't just a story about a forgotten place. It's a story about what we choose to forget, and what happens when the forgotten start whispering back. It's easy to miss. Tucked between the Bronx and Rikers Island, hidden in the churning currents of the East River, North Brother Island floats quietly, out of reach, out of mind. It's just 13 acres. Smaller than Central Park's Great Lawn. Close enough to hear Manhattan's heartbeat, yet distant enough to feel forgotten by time itself. Ferries don't stop here. Tourists don't come. And even the birds sometimes seem hesitant to stay. The shoreline is a tangle of broken docks, rusted fences, and collapsing boathouses. Vines snake over brick, trees grow through hospital windows, and silence swallows every corner. There are no footsteps here, only wind, only whispers. For more than a century, this island has served a purpose no one wanted to talk about. It was not a park, not a home, not a place you ever wanted to end up. This was where the city sent people it didn't know what to do with. The contagious, the dying, the inconvenient. Even its origins were reluctant. In the 19th century, as New York's population exploded, public health crises followed like shadows. The city was desperate to keep diseases like smallpox, typhus, and tuberculosis from spreading in the crowded tenements. So they looked across the water, to a quiet island with no roads, no bridges, no neighbors to complain. North Brother became the perfect exile, and that isolation, it became a character in its own right. Even now, the island feels like it's holding its breath, as if it remembers the stretchers, the screams, the cries for help that never came, as if it still carries the weight of every soul it was forced to hold. North Brother Island didn't fade because we moved past it. It faded because we chose to look away. Her name was Mary Mallon, but history would never let her keep it. Instead, they called her something else. Typhoid Mary. A name soaked in fear. A name that turned one woman into a warning. She was an Irish immigrant, like so many others in early 1900s New York. Poor, hardworking, invisible to most. She made a living as a cook for wealthy families. She was good at it, trusted, quiet. But wherever she went, something else followed. Sickness, fever, vomiting, death. Entire households would fall ill weeks after hiring her, and when doctors began connecting the dots, all paths led back to Mary. She had no symptoms, no cough, no fever. She didn't feel sick. But inside her body, the bacteria known as Salmonella typhi was silently spreading. In 1907, after weeks of surveillance and suspicion, Mary was forcibly taken from her home, dragged away by health officials, and locked inside a quarantine facility on North Brother Island. No trial, no warning, no voice. She became the first person in American history to be quarantined, not because she was sick, but because she could make others sick. They told her she was dangerous. They told her she had to stay. And for the next 3 years, Mary Mallon lived in isolation, alone in a tiny cottage at the edge of the island. Watched, examined, blamed. She begged for release. She insisted she was being scapegoated. She even filed lawsuits. But none of it mattered. To the public, she was no longer a person. She was a symbol of contagion, of recklessness, of fear. Eventually, she was freed on one condition: never cook again. But poverty has a way of breaking promises. And Mary, desperate for work, returned to kitchens under a false name. The outbreak started again. The city found her again. And in 1915, she was brought back to North Brother Island. This time, for life. She would spend 23 years in exile. She died there in 1938. Her body was buried in the Bronx, but her story stayed on the island. Mary Mallon was never violent. She didn't choose to be a carrier. She didn't even know what typhoid meant when they accused her. Yet she became a villain in the public eye. Because fear needs a face. And North Brother Island became the stage. Behind every crumbling brick, every rusted bed frame, there's a whisper of her story, of a woman punished not for what she did, but for what she carried, before it became a prison for the unwanted. North Brother Island was a hospital, but not the kind that healed. Not really. It was called Riverside Hospital, built in the 1880s to house the sick, the contagious, the dying. But more than that, it was a holding place for those society wanted out of sight: tuberculosis, smallpox, scarlet fever, typhoid. Disease was the ticket in, and for many there was no ticket out. In the name of public health, the city sent its most vulnerable to this tiny island, just off the coast of the Bronx, but a world away from mercy. The buildings were cold and crumbling, the beds too few. The staff, overworked, undertrained, and often indifferent. Immigrants made up much of the hospital's population. Newcomers from Italy, Ireland, Eastern Europe, sick from overcrowded tenements, poisoned water, factory filth. They were seen not as patients, but as risks. Many couldn't speak English. They didn't understand the papers they signed. They didn't know they'd been committed, sometimes indefinitely. They were told it was for the greater good. That isolation would protect the city. That suffering in silence was a civic duty. But inside those hospital walls there was little care. No comfort, no dignity, no future. Reports described rooms thick with mildew and rats, patients left unattended, bodies removed in the dead of night, unmarked graves waiting behind the trees. And yet, this was considered progress. To the city's health commissioners, Riverside Hospital was a solution. It kept the disease at bay. It kept the streets cleaner. It kept fear contained. But the price was human life. People came to the island with fevers and coughs, and were buried nameless beneath its soil. There was no justice for the mistreated, no press coverage for the forgotten, no outcry from a city too busy to look across the water, just a quiet, steady stream of ferries delivering the unwanted, and leaving with nothing but silence. Hospitals are meant to heal, but on North Brother Island, they served another function: to erase. June 15, 1904. It was supposed to be a day of joy, a church outing, a steamboat called the General Slocum, and over 2,300 passengers, mostly women and children from Manhattan's German-American community, headed for a picnic on Long Island. They never made it. Just minutes after leaving the dock, a fire broke out in the lower decks. Rags soaked in oil, stored near flammable paint, ignited into an inferno, and the flames spread fast, too fast. The crew panicked. The lifeboats were rotted and wired in place. The life vests, stuffed with powdered cork, long since useless. Mothers clutched babies. Children screamed. The water, meant to be a refuge, became a grave. And just across the river, North Brother Island stood waiting. Survivors were dragged ashore, burned, choking, sobbing. Nurses from Riverside Hospital rushed out with blankets and water. Priests delivered last rites beside piles of bodies. The dead numbered over 1,000, mostly women, mostly children. The smell of smoke and wet ash hung in the trees. For days, the shoreline was lined with shoes, dolls, hair ribbons, personal echoes of the lost. The island absorbed it all. The trauma, the screams, the silence that followed. Newspapers called it the worst disaster in New York City history before 9/11. But today, few remember its name. Fewer still know that the wounded were brought here, to a place already steeped in grief. The General Slocum disaster did more than scar a city. It marked North Brother Island with something deeper, a curse of memory. Because even if time moved on, the island did not forget. The cries still echo in the reeds, the ghosts still drift in the fog, and every June, when the sun hits the river just right, some say you can still hear the boat whistle just before the fire begins. They say the walls remember. And if that's true, then the walls of North Brother Island are drowning in secrets. After the flames of the General Slocum faded, the island didn't find peace. It grew darker, quieter, more hidden. Officially, Riverside Hospital continued to treat tuberculosis patients, but the stories whispered beyond the ferry docks told something else. Patients who entered and never came back, rooms with no windows, locked basements where the coughing never stopped. Some say experiments were carried out, early vaccines, forced drug trials, psychological treatments on the poor, the immigrant, the voiceless. Was it science or silence? There are no official records, only scattered testimonies, unmarked boxes in city archives, and the heavy reluctance of those who once worked there. In the years that followed, the rumors only grew. Government vehicles seen docking after dark, military uniforms, but no answers. Some believe the island was used for classified testing, bioweapons, nerve agents, Cold War tactics cloaked in quarantine protocol, and yet, nothing proven, just scraps of paper and haunted glances. By the 1950s, North Brother Island took in another group, young heroin addicts. The city hoped isolation would cure them. Instead, many were locked inside rooms without treatment. No therapists, no exit plan, just time and withdrawal. One former resident called it a prison without guards. Another said, "We were ghosts before we died." And maybe that's the theme of this island. Ghosts before death. Stories that live in shadows. Truths too painful or too dangerous to be written down. Paranormal investigators have tried to get close. They talk of cold spots, voices on recorders, and things moving in empty hallways. The story of North Brother Island ends, not with sirens, but with silence. After decades of disease, isolation, and quiet suffering, Riverside Hospital closed its doors. By the 1940s, medical practices had evolved. Quarantine was no longer the answer. And the island, once teeming with nurses, orderlies, and the dying, fell still. But not for long. In the 1950s, a new chapter began. Not one of healing, but containment. The city reopened the island as a rehabilitation center for teenage drug addicts. Young lives derailed by heroin, sent to this island not for treatment, but for isolation. They called it a voluntary program, but many who arrived never gave consent. They were held against their will, detoxing alone in rooms with peeling paint and barred windows. No therapy, no guidance, no hope. Just the ghosts of yesterday and the punishment of today. It didn't last long. By the early 1960s, the facility was shuttered. The last patient left. The last ferry docked. And the island was forgotten. What came next wasn't human. Vines crept through window frames. Trees split floors and staircases. Birdsong replaced screams. Nature came, not in vengeance, but in quiet triumph. Buildings sagged under the weight of time. Roofs caved in. Moss overtook tile. Ferns bloomed in old operating rooms. What man abandoned, nature embraced. Today, North Brother Island is off limits. A designated bird sanctuary, home to herons and cormorants, guarded by the city, protected from intrusion. But the island still watches. Its crumbling hospital walls peek through thickets like ancient bones. A broken gurney lies in a hallway, coated in dust and ivy. A faded chalkboard still lists medicine doses from decades past. No electricity, no footsteps, no voices. Just the hum of wind, the rustle of wings, and the slow reclaiming of land once soaked in sorrow. It is as if the earth itself is trying to heal what humans could not, covering the past with green silence, not to forget it, but to forgive it. And in that overgrown silence, a different kind of life begins. Just off the coast of one of the loudest cities in the world lies an island that makes no sound, North Brother Island. No ferry goes there. No tourist boats linger. No children laugh along its shore. Not because it's impossible, but because it's easier not to. For decades, the island sat untouched, a forbidden relic, sealed behind rusting fences and government warnings. No trespassing, no entry, no answers. A few have tried. Urban explorers with cameras and flashlights have stepped through the ruins, catching glimpses of collapsed staircases, medical files turned to mulch, a child's shoe lying beneath a vine-covered bed frame. Their photos whisper what the city has tried to forget. This happened. Here. Just across the water. There have been talks of preserving it as a historical site, of honoring its past. But the conversations always fade, like the names of the people who died there. Because remembering would mean confronting what we did in the name of public safety, and what we failed to do in the name of humanity. Today, the island is a sanctuary for birds, and a graveyard of memory. No plaques, no statues, no names, just a crumbling chapel, a hallway lined with empty beds, and the echo of things no one wants to talk about. We forget places like this, not because they don't matter, but because they do. And maybe that's the real horror of North Brother Island. It was never haunted. We were. Some stories don't end with a full stop. They just drift into silence. North Brother Island still floats quietly in the East River, shrouded in fog, its windows long shattered, its walls swallowed by vines. But if you listen, truly listen, you might still hear something. The rustle of forgotten names, the echo of a nurse's footsteps down a darkened hall, the whispers of children who never came home, the heavy breath of fear, isolation, and regret. This island wasn't just a place. It was a mirror, reflecting how we treat the sick, the poor, the inconvenient. How many other places like this exist, buried just beneath the surface? Too uncomfortable to remember, too important to forget. Fog hides the past, but it doesn't erase it. Somewhere just across the water, the voices are still waiting.